Tumia Bima Pap kwa kupiga nyota 150 nyota 51 alama ya reli au kwa WhatsApp namba 0764166066 na ujipatie bima ya dereva kipato.
Bima Pap, urahisi wa maisha.
Greetings, welcome to the Citizen Exclusive with Mpoke Thompson here at Mwananchi Communications Limited. We have a special guest today, the British High Commissioner, David Concar. David, welcome to Mwananchi Communications Limited and welcome to the Citizen Digital.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Perfect. So just to get things started, our audience would like to know what's happening in as far as Tanzania-Britain relations are concerned. But let's kick it off on a bigger scale. Of late, there has been a rising interest of Western countries and China, Russia, India, partnering with Africa. Now, we understand that these countries all have different ideologies, different interests and different agendas. So, as a Western power, what is your opinion in terms of how this will impact the geopolitics?
Thank you. This is a really big topic and a really important. But first of all, Africa matters. Sub-Saharan Africa matters. North Africa matter to the rest of the world, as well as, of course, to everyone who's living in Africa itself. And Africa's history of engagement with the rest of the world has, if you go back centuries, often been difficult and not delivered the benefits for people living in Africa. So I think my first point would be whoever is engaging with Africa in the 21st century, you know, we need to be thinking about how do we deliver for the people of Africa, right? Okay. And that's paramount. And so I can't speak for China or India or Russia on that, but what I can speak to is the UK's commitment to work with sub-Saharan countries, African countries, in a very win-win way. We do have things to offer Africa. Africa has things to offer us. We have to find the mechanisms and the ways in which we can both, benefit from the relationship. But clearly, in the past, African countries have not benefited to the degree that they need to. I think that's the key first point from the UK side, and we need to move forward and change that. One specific area where Africa, which is so important for African countries, including Tanzania, is having fair access to international financing on good and reasonable and sustainable terms. The kind of world of money, the world of international financing, has often not been configured in the way that can best serve Africa's own interests. And I think there's more realization around the world about that now. And the UK is committed to working with African countries, working with developing country leaders elsewhere on this agenda, reforming the international financial institutions in order that they can serve African countries better.
Okay, so that means that you are in support of the African Union recent idea of developing Pan-African credit rating agency, because the likes of the Standard & Poor seem to be unfairly treating the African economy, which makes it a bit difficult for African countries to access international loans. So are you in support of a Pan-African credit rating agency?
We are absolutely in support of African countries being able to access financing on fairer, more affordable, more sustainable terms. If a Pan-African credit agency could be set up that would genuinely deliver that, I'm sure it would get UK support. But the other institutions, with the IFIs, there are many of them, but they all need some level of reform. One of the leaders in the world who's really pushing hard and very effectively in this area is Mia Mottley from the Caribbean. And the UK has had a lot of engagement with Mia Mottley about her so-called Bridgetown agenda, which is all about reforming international financial institutions so they can do the job better. One thing that the UK is really pushing hard on at the moment in this space is the idea of climate resilient clauses So that if you have loans, international loans, and you are hit as a developing country by a climate-related disaster, flooding, whatever, then you can invoke and use the mechanism of pausing your repayments on that finance, serving that loan, in order that you can then divert, at least for a period of time, your resources to dealing with the crisis.
Yeah.
As we know, climate change is a global phenomenon. It's going to be hitting all countries to some degree. Many African countries are going to be hit particularly hard by it for one reason or another. So that's the kind of mechanism that needs to be built in to financial products and loans to African countries, from this way forward. So we are pushing, the UK is pushing that particularly hard.
Yeah, but then there's been a little bit of a concern of late. We see what's happening to Uganda. When the country enacted the anti-gay law, countries like the US, the World Bank, started shutting the country out of accessing international aid. So as a developed country, you offer concessional loans to countries like Tanzania, Uganda, and the rest of the developing world. These loans are seen as having stringent rules that conform to the Western ideals. So if a country like Uganda decides that they want to move a certain way, and then countries like the UK, the US, or even the World Bank decide that, unless you conform to our rules, you won't be able to access these loans. Does that trump the need of the Ugandan people when you decide to shut them out of accessing any financial aid?
Well, the UK's position on LGBT plus rights globally around the world is very clear. We absolutely staunchly support the right of all groups to be treated fairly and not face discrimination. And we absolutely stand by the idea that is covered by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that all minorities, including LGBT plus communities, deserve to be treated equally and not be subject to discrimination. The UK's position on Uganda's legislation is clear. We disagree with that legislation. We do not think it's in line with meeting human rights commitments and standards around the world, and we don't think it's in Uganda's interests. The question about how financial institutions and others then respond to that kind of situation. Each institution, of course, has to make their own mind up. But each institution, just like the UK government or the US government, all governments are answerable to their own constituents and their own electorates and their own taxpayers, who pay a lot of attention to issues of human rights around the world. And of course, governments and international financial institutions and so on will need to take into account the positions of the people who finance them, fund them, and give them the platform on which they operate around the world. And that means that once certain lines are crossed on human rights, they will need to take a difficult decision, and maybe pause or seek dialogue with the government in question, wherever it is in the world, and reach a new understanding. So I think it's a great... nobody is happy to see financial institutions having to do this, but on some occasions, it is something that's going to need to happen in order for those institutions to be answerable and to meet their own standards. So we hope that things can be resolved on that issue. But we recognise it, and we recognise there are strong feelings on all sides. But in the end, the UK position is clear. We don't agree with the Ugandan legislation. We hope that Uganda will move away from that, but we do hope that the financial institutions and others, through dialogue with Uganda, can come to some understanding in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about trade and investment. Recently, the UK trade envoy to Tanzania was in the country, Lord Wanley, and he met with different ministers, Minister of Agriculture, Mining, the Deputy Prime Minister. We would like to get a bit more insights on what the talks were about, what were the engagements about, and what Tanzania should expect.
Thank you. So this was the fourth visit of the UK Prime Minister's trade envoy to Tanzania, and so he's got quite a record of travelling here and engaging, which I think is a real positive. On the issue of mining, Tanzania, as we all know, has a lot to offer. It has many minerals and big deposits of certain minerals, including minerals that are in high demand now and into the future, including nickel and rare earth elements and so on. The problem in the past for countries like Tanzania has been that their ability and the investment that's brought here has not always enabled Tanzania itself to extract as much value from its mineral mining products as it should. This goes back to the point I made earlier about changing the way we work and invest in Africa to ensure that more of the value stays in Africa and more of the value cascades out across the communities and populations here. So in the world of mining, what that means is it means listening carefully to the government, and Lord Morley did this. So when the government ministers say, well, our goal and our strategy is to process and refine, do more of the refining and the processing of minerals here, we have to, as a partner and a friend of Tanzania, we have to listen to them, we have to take it seriously, and we are doing. And then we then have to say, okay, so how can our businesses and our investors work with Tanzania to enable that to happen? UK has a connection with Kabanga Nickel project here, and at the heart of the Kabanga Nickel program or project is the goal of doing the processing of the nickel here in Tanzania and creating a facility there that might also be able to process ore and minerals from elsewhere in the region. That is a good example of how the mindset is now shifting, and that's positive. We believe that's positive and necessary for Tanzania and also other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's how we want to work in the mining space. But this point about listening is so important. The trade envoy also, we had a very good meeting with the agriculture minister, Hussein Bashe, who explained to us what the challenges are with improving productivity in agriculture in Tanzania. And so we're able to take that listening away and reflect on it and think about how British investors can work within that framework to help Tanzania deliver that goal of commercializing agriculture at the same time as enabling those people who need to make a livelihood from agriculture to continue to do so in Tanzania. This is a challenging set of issues, but we were very impressed, and the trade envoy was very impressed with the ambition of the agriculture minister, which we know is shared by the president.
Yes, indeed. Now let's go back a little bit to the mining issue. We understand that Tanzania, in its endeavor to ensure that local companies, in what is known as the local content, is protected, in the year 2017, a law that is considered to be a bit arbitrary was enacted, which led to multiple cases being filed in the international court. So at the moment, as we speak, if you read the news online or even the print newspaper, oftentimes we talk about the government settling a certain case with an international investor. Now, since the UK also has some interest within the mining sector, I would want you to give us a sense of the level of confidence that investors from the UK have in investing in Tanzania in the mining industry, because one of the issues that they keep talking about is how their investments are protected. We understand that the government is trying to create a win-win situation where the country, gets to benefit, but also the investor gets to benefit. So what is the level of confidence that the investors from the UK have for the current regime, specifically within the mining sector?
So I think what I can say is confidence is growing. There has been a real shift just in the last few years in terms of the government here's general approach to handling the private sector writ large, including within the mining sector. So it is growing. It's moving in the right direction. There were some very high-profile cases, that made the international press and so on a few years back. Some of those cases are still working their way through. Yeah. I think there are still some things that the government could do that would help to further enhance confidence across the board in terms of investment, including in the mining sector. So big investors who bring a lot of money to the table, they do have need to be given certain assurances and be confident that the legal framework into which they are investing will be one that they can work with, that's predictable, that satisfies basic criteria that they will have. They need to be confident that there won't be a huge sort of like rewriting of the contract after it is started in ways that would then make it no longer financially viable for them, or even loss-making for them. They need to, all investors wherever you are in the world those basic things need to be in place. So there are still some things that the government could do that would improve that. The government, my sense is, knows exactly what those are, and I'm confident that over the next few years, some of those issues are going to be resolved. I think some investors, going back maybe 2 years ago, would have expected a bit more progress on some of the issues by now. But I think everyone recognises that there is a positive direction of travel, if I can put it that way. So, of course, the international investors follow Tanzania very closely across many sectors. Improvements in the business environment here will undoubtedly unlock more investment.
Okay, so back to agriculture. The issue of value addition has always been a topical one since time immemorial. Whenever we talk to any investor within the agriculture space in Tanzania, we ask them what are the efforts that are being put out there to enable Tanzanian farmers be able to add value to the produce instead of exporting the crude kind of products. So, as the UK, you met with the agriculture minister. What are the initiatives, if at all there are any, that aim to empower Tanzania to enable, as a country, to export finished products?
So first of all, some agricultural products are being exported from Tanzania, including to the UK. You can go into UK supermarkets and buy, for example, avocados from Tanzania and so on. So that there is progress is being made. A lot of the value on agricultural products can be added through SMEs, agri-processing businesses of one kind or another. So one thing that can help those businesses grow in Tanzania is access to financing on affordable terms. Some of these small, medium-sized enterprises find it quite difficult to access financing to grow their businesses. If they can access it, often the terms and the interest rates are very high.
Okay. So let's talk a bit about the developing countries trading scheme that the UK has embarked on. So how does Tanzania, I believe it was launched this year in July or June, thereabout. So how does Tanzania stand to benefit from such an arrangement? Because it gives African economies a preferential treatment in terms of trading with the UK and I believe access to other broader markets. How does Tanzania stand to benefit, and what are the projections, if there are any, that have already been outlined?
How it stands to benefit is that it's a very generous and relatively simply configured scheme. First of all, products made in Tanzania can be exported to the UK, and no import tariff will be applied.
All products?
All products, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
On a quota, there's no quota either. So it's not like you export up to a certain volume and then suddenly you have to start paying a tariff. So it's quota-free, tariff-free trading into the UK market. So there is an opportunity there for Tanzanian businesses to export. I think horticultural sector is one area where I would predict. I don't have any precise forecasts or projections, but I think we will see more products in the horticultural sector being exported to the UK in coming years. I think other sectors could also in future benefit, maybe not immediately, but in the not too distant future. One would be garment sector. I mean, one of the things about Tanzania, it grows cotton, you have relatively cheap labour. There is potential here for a garment industry and a sizable growth in that area. If the government is able to achieve that, then the products from that sector could then be exported to through this scheme to the UK. A characteristic which is very important and favourable towards Tanzania and other countries who are eligible is rules of origin. Rules of origin are about the often complicate things by putting a barrier around the export of a product that involves materials or inputs from other countries. The UK scheme is not only very generous in that area, but also very simple. And so on rules of origin, countries like Tanzania have a lot more scope to export products to the UK through this scheme, even where they include content and materials from outside of Tanzania. Let me give you an example. The tie I'm wearing today is stitched in Tanzania. I don't know where the fabric comes from. I'm not sure. It may come from Tanzania. It may come from outside. But regardless of where the fabric comes from, the tie, if it's stitched in Tanzania and value has been added through the production in Tanzania, it can qualify to be exported. So there are many benefits associated with this scheme. And I think we now are working with Tanzanian institutions to enable them to take advantage of it, including to ensure that they're able to meet some of the product standards that would enable them to get into the UK market. One area where that would be really important is the one I mentioned, horticulture, where the supermarkets have certain standards and so on. So we need to lean in, and we are doing, to help Tanzanian associations, the Tanzania Horticultural Association, for example, we've worked with in the past. That's the kind of body here that we need to engage with and support to be able, so they can enable their members to access and take advantage of this.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about security. So on October 30th, 2023, the UK embassy here in Tanzania issued a security alert, security warning for its nationals in Tanzania, specifically related to the crisis in Mozambique, the northern Mozambique, the Cabo Delgado province. How do you work with the Tanzanian government when it comes to now such high-level issues in as far as security is concerned? We just want to get, because we wanted to run the story, but getting confirmation from the government was a bit of an issue. And usually whenever it comes to matters of national security, that's very critical. So I just want to get an understanding of how the UK embassy works with the Tanzanian government when it comes to issues of security.
Well, we have an active cooperation in areas of security, training. We have last year we signed renewed an MOU through the Ministry of Defence and so on. So we do cooperate, and we do support capability training, and that's right, and that will continue. The issue you raise around the travel advice, the UK's travel advice to Tanzania, I would, a bit of moderation in terms of how that's perceived, because a country like the UK, all countries, all governments, in terms of their overseas, missions and so on, have a responsibility to provide advice to citizens, and including travel advice that relates to security. That's something we all have to do, and we all take that role seriously. As part of that, the UK is, on an ongoing basis, always taking a look at its travel advice, reviewing it, and when necessary, where something happens or changes in the environment, to reflect that in the travel advice, in the language we use. A lot of thought goes into that. It's not just done, in the heat of the moment or whatever. The advice that's just, our travel advice at the moment, first of all, I wouldn't describe it as a security alert. I would just describe it as an update to the travel advice. Of course, British nationals and others who look at our travel advice and subscribe to the online to get it will have received something that says, we are updating our travel advice.
Yes.
But I would describe it as an update rather than an alert. I think the main elements of our advice on travelling to Tanzania at the moment long-standing. So we have, for a long time, advised people about the risks very close to the border with Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, where we all know there has been a problem there with a radical Islamist group that has committed acts of violence and that have affected Tanzanians as well as people living in Mozambique. That problem has not gone entirely away. It's been, I think, contained quite well by Tanzanian security working alongside Mozambique and security and so on. But it hasn't been entirely removed. There are still some risks in that space. But that part of our travel advice has been there for a long time. So that is not a new warning. But we always keep it under review. We don't want to panic people or alarm people, but we do have a responsibility to reflect the overall picture and keep that updated, which is what we've done this week. We've just updated the travel advice. It's not a new warning.
Okay, so just to get an understanding of how this usually works, do you communicate with the government prior and just tell them that we're going to update travel advisory, because it does have a bit of impact in terms of some of the key areas, for example, in tourism. If someone is planning to come to Tanzania, but then they see a travel advisory, so just to get an idea, is the government caught off guard, or do you talk to them and tell them that you just give them a bit of some insights into that?
Well, this latest update is routine.
Okay.
Sometimes our travel advisory, goes up a notch in terms of, the overall level of warning. Sometimes it comes down a notch, depending on, what's happening. If it was not a routine update, of course, we would ensure everyone is aware in advance. But this was a routine update.
Okay, well, Mr. Ambassador, Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. You were with me, Mpoki Thompson, for The Citizen Digital. Until next time, bye-bye.
Kabla tujaanza safari, wengi tukikumbuka tutahakikisha matairi, upepo upo fresh. Tutahakikisha spana na jeki zipo na zinafanya kazi. Tutahakikisha breki zinakamata, taa za mbele, nyuma, indicator, hazard zinawaka. Hapo sawa. Wiper zinafanya kazi. Tutaangalia oili, injini na maji. Tutanunua bima na bima papo ili zisome na kusomeka. Kisha gari inaoshwa. Yote hayo ni utayari wa chombo chako na changamoto za safari. Ila so kwa ajili yako wewe dereva. Dereva, umechukua hatua gani kulinda uhakika wa kuendelea kujipatia hela? Si unajua ya barabarani hayatabiriki.
Tumia bima pap kwa kupiga *150 *51 alama ya reli au kwa WhatsApp namba 0764166066 na ujipatie bima ya dereva kipato.
Umahiri wa dereva hauishii tu kwenye kumudu usukani, bali pia umakini wa kulinda kipato chake wakati wa majanga ya kifedha.
Bima Pub, urahisi wa maisha.